So for this bread, you want about a tablespoon of yeast dissolved in a half a cup of warm water. And you want that to proof. That is, you want it to get foamy. And then after it is, you want to add another cup of warm water. So it will look, you see, after this has been in the water now for about 10 minutes, it looks like this, very foamy. And now I can add the rest of my water. And that is another cup. So I want to put that in. And then, well, there was no real recipe to this. This was just something that came from the mind. She would start with flour. And now I like to use unbleached flour. And here I have about 4 cups of unbleached flour. And one of the things I learned from not only Mrs. Belurgi, but my grandmother and my mother as well, is that never add all the flour at one time, because you just don't know how much the flour is going to be absorbed by the liquid. So you have to do it a little bit at a time. And of course, they could do this in the wink of an eye. So I put mine in a little bit at a time like that, you see, and I think I'm going to need all of it. And then, after I've got it mixed to the point where I can take it out of the bowl, I want just enough flour in there to hold this mixture together. Well, then you want to turn it out onto a work surface. And I remember Mrs. Belurgi always working on an old wood table in her kitchen that had an oilcloth over it. And whenever I was sent over there, of course, there was always something for me to eat. And she was always cooking. And bread was something that she made every week. And I particularly liked this bread. And I'm glad that I always had the occasion to go over to her house, because I tried so many different things that she brought with her, you see, from Italy. And so now, after you can get the mass of dough that you have out, well, then you want to work and get it into a nice smooth ball. So now you want to knead this until it's nice and smooth, you see, and that's going to take you about 10 minutes. And then get out that bowl. What did I do with it? Here it is. And give it a little bit of olive oil. And now oftentimes she just did this right on her table after she took the oilcloth off, but I always loved the way they would take the dough and just put it in the bowl, you see, and wipe it like that. And then they would cover it with a towel. Well, that's the one thing that I do differently about this dough. You see, I cover mine with plastic wrap because I like the way that keeps the heat in the dough and allows that to rise nicely. So then, after that's risen, about a good hour, an hour and a half, it'll look something like this, you see? And then you want to take that out and put it back on a floured surface. So I want to get a little bit more flour here and get these little pieces off that I don't need. And now look at how nice and light that is. And it just comes out of the bowl so beautifully. I think Mrs. B would really be proud of me. So now you want to knead that. And you see, when you let dough rest somewhat, it's a lot easier to knead. And Mrs. B knew that intuitively, but I had to learn that not only from her, but also from my mother and my grandmother. So now I just want to wipe off my hands here a little bit because I've got just a little bit too much dough on them. And now, while you're kneading this dough, of course, you want to have some pumpkin seeds ready. And what I do is I buy hulled pumpkin seeds and put them on a cookie sheet. And then I just toast them in the oven at 375 for about, 7 or 8 minutes. You want to be careful not to let them brown. You say, here they are. And this is what they look like. And now Mrs. B, of course, when she planted her pumpkins, would save the seeds. And then she'd wash and she'd dry them. And she'd have them for planting pumpkins the next year. But she also put it in this bread. So now I've got my bread dough to where I want it, and I want to roll it out into a round. And another thing she did was to take just a piece of that dough off. She put it in a little jar with olive oil, and that became the cresciuto, or the dough that she would use to start the next pumpkin bread. So get it rolled out, and that's clever, and I always use that trick now too. There. Now I want to add olive oil. So put on a little bit of olive oil, not too much, maybe about a tablespoon, 2 tablespoons, and this is extra virgin olive oil. And spread it all over the dough. And then get those pumpkin seeds. And this is about 2/3 of a cup. That's a lot of seeds. And if you don't want to use that many, well, you don't have to. So spread them on. And oh, today I'm feeling really old-fashioned. I'm going to add a little bit of that slivered pumpkin. You see? Put it right in there. And now what you want to do is take that dough and just roll it up as if you were forming a jelly roll. And when I watched Mrs. B doing this, I thought this was fascinating because I thought she was going to cook it just like that. But no, she still had another little trick up her sleeve. She got a little bit more flour on the board, you see, just like this. And I was eating Tarali by then, those hard biscuits. And she'd fold this, and she would really get into this. So now you keep going like this, you see, until you have a nice supple ball. And you want those pumpkin seeds to come right through the dough, and I'm really working hard at this. And that's going to take you, about 5 or 10 minutes to do, and it makes a very attractive looking loaf. And then you want to put that on a bake sheet with a cloth over it and let it rise again. But I like to use a peel, a baker's peel. And I put the dough right on like that, you see? And then I cover it like that, and I let it rise. And when it's risen, it looks like that. And now that's ready to go into the oven. So now you want to have your oven at 375 if you're doing this on a bake sheet. If you're doing it on a stone, a bake stone, like I'm doing, well, then you want that temperature a little higher, maybe 400, 425. And then I sprinkle my bake stone, you see, with cornmeal, and that's so that the dough doesn't stick. And now I like to use a bake stone because it creates a nice hard crust, and it's nothing but a piece of unglazed quarry tile. So now I get my bread off the peel by a quick prayer to Mrs. B. And with a flick of the wrist, you see, there it goes. And now I can put it in, and I want that to cook, about 30 or 35 minutes until it's nice and hard.